starting out with purely factual what's going on in the body and brain of a tween to teen to early 20s. That's what we mean. I agree wholeheartedly on that front, Anna. Hormonal changes. So we all know the changes that come if you've gone through it with your kid, how they change in how they approach problems, how they interact with you as the parent, their ability to take on responsibilities if they're motivated, those kinds of things. A lot of it is tied to the hormonal changes that their bodies are going through. They're going through this enormous change from a child to a physically adult body. And their brain is going through some chemical changes during that time period too. And I think in my perspective, the brain takes longer to catch up with the physical changes, right? So when teens are going through their teenage hormonal development and they're going through all those teenage hormonal mood swings that, again, if you've been around teenagers anytime in the last 20 years, you know this. Or maybe you can reflect back and remember your own mood swings from teenage years, perhaps. Then the brain is highly focused on self and it loses connections that once were. And where this comes in to be challenging is you may have had a younger child who did really well with their parts of their diabetes management. You didn't really have to nag them. You didn't really have to check in on them very often. They knew the drill and they did it. And you supported and helped in whatever way was needed. But then suddenly you realize your teen is no longer reliable to change their pump every 3 days or change their sensor when it's due to change or remember to take their dose at lunch at school in front of their peers or whatever. The list goes on. Some of that is actually related to the hormones and their strong sense of independence and trying to break away from the mold. Some of that is actually related to their brain physiology, and those neurons need to be reconnected. You have to connect those synapses to be able to do things that once were sort of automatic. You have to rebuild those habits over time. And therein lies many of the struggles that we're going to talk about today.
Welcome to Think Like a Pancreas, the podcast, where our goal is to keep you informed, inspired, and a little entertained on all things diabetes. The information contained in this program is based on the experience and opinions of the Integrated Diabetes Services clinical team. Please discuss any changes to your treatment plan with your personal healthcare provider before implementing.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Think Like a Pancreas, the podcast. My name is Anna Sabino, mental health clinician here at Integrated Diabetes Services. I've also lived with type 1 for 37 years through the teenage years and now love working with children, youth, and families and adults. But I have a special passion for teens and young adults as they navigate this sort of trying period of life with diabetes. Tavia.
I'm Tavia Vital. I'm a registered nurse and certified diabetes care and education specialist with Integrated Diabetes Services. And my interest in this area is twofold. I lived through my teens long time ago with type 1 diabetes myself. And thankfully, ability to treat diabetes and the options that are available have changed greatly since that time. The other area of interest that brings me here with Anna today is that I have a teenage son who also has type 1 diabetes. So I lived through this lens long ago. I have my son who's living it now. And part of my work with Integrated is working with families who are navigating getting through adolescence with type 1 diabetes from the family perspective and from the teens perspective. So I'm excited to be here and talk through things with Anna today.
Awesome. And I think, is sort of the elephant in the room. We all know that teenagers, teenagers, sort of young adults, I really say, anywhere from like 12 to 24, there's so many transitions happening in life from sort of these like physical milestones to all the like sort of push pull with independence. And we're going to talk about all of it, kind of the technical stuff, the mental, like juggling gymnastics stuff. But I think first and foremost, we should set the stage, Tavia, around just like, why is being in adolescence such a unique challenge when it comes with T1D from that like nursing pathophysiological perspective?
For sure. Yeah. So just starting out in the not getting lost in the weeds of all the other things that can contribute, but just starting out with purely factual what's going on in the body and brain of a tween to teen to early 20s. That's what we mean. I agree wholeheartedly on that front, Anna. Hormonal changes. So we all know the changes that come if you've gone through it with your kid, how they change in how they approach problems, how they interact with you as the parent, their ability to take on responsibilities if they're motivated, those kinds of things. A lot of it is tied to the hormonal changes that their bodies are going through. They're going through this enormous change from a child to a physically adult body. And their brain is going through some chemical changes during that time period too. And I think, in my perspective, the brain takes longer to catch up with the physical changes, right? So when teens are going through their teenage hormonal development and they're going through all those teenage hormonal mood swings that, again, if you've been around teenagers anytime in the last 20 years, you know this. Or maybe you can reflect back and remember your own mood swings from teenage years, perhaps. Then the brain is highly focused on self and it loses connections that once were. And where this comes in to be challenging is you may have had a younger child who did really well with their parts of their diabetes management. You didn't really have to nag them, didn't really have to check in on them very often. They knew the drill and they did it. And you supported and helped in whatever way was needed. But then suddenly you realize your teen is no longer reliable to change their pump every 3 days or change their sensor when it's due to change or remember to take their dose at lunch at school in front of their peers or whatever. The list goes on. Some of that is actually related to the hormones and their strong sense of independence and trying to break away from the mold. Some of that is actually related to their brain physiology, and those neurons need to be reconnected. You have to connect those synapses to be able to do things that once were sort of automatic. You have to rebuild those habits over time. And therein lies many of the struggles that we're going to talk about today.
Absolutely. Well, and thank you for kind of just like setting the stage because I think sometimes, especially for the parents that I work with, I think we tend to assume that when we're talking about independence and like sort of transferring knowledge, like just because these kids, and they really are kids, just because these kids have the ability to do them doesn't mean they like want to do them and like b are emotionally ready to do them. Like being physically capable of doing something like changing a pump site doesn't mean they're emotionally ready to just take on that challenge. So I think being able to separate out that, as we talk more about independence probably later on, you know, there are so many factors that come into the executive functioning piece, which we know is like the last to develop as part of that like very, very tippity top of that prefrontal cortex of the brain. But I think sometimes we forget to emphasize that, teenagers, like they're supposed to be curious. They're supposed to have urges. They're supposed to push boundaries. They're supposed to like figure out who they might be. They're supposed to take little risks. Yet when it comes to diabetes, that is the scariest piece because sure, like you do one little risk, like, I don't want to, this is a terrible example, but like maybe you like steal some nail polish from CVS. Well, the consequence of that is not the same as like the medical consequence of like forgetting your pump at school. So I think that is the hardest part for parents. And this stage of life is at baseline. I don't want to use the word terrible, but it is exhausting for both the teen and the parent. And trying to maintain that relationship is so hard. But when you're doing it with these sort of like very front of mind for parents and very back of mind for child, tasks related to health, it can be a struggle.
And I think another thing that's important in this discussion is thinking about how adults look at the big picture long term,
Yeah.
and teens just mentally aren't really there yet.
Yep.
Even if you could ask them, what's your plan in the future? And they can tell you, I'm going to this college and I'm going to become this professional, whatever their plan is, right? They can potentially do that. But health wise, they don't, that health impact over the long haul, that isn't there. They don't have that in their
Yeah.
perspective. Even if you
I
tell
think
them over and over,
yeah.
it doesn't hit home the way it does for an
Yeah.
adult looking at the same problem and trying to
100%.
manage
And I
things.
think if we could just level set those expectations for parents, like right out of the gate, I think once parents can start to accept that, like, okay, my kid just isn't going to prioritize these tasks in the same way my brain is. I think a lot of
Yeah.
times these parents think that these teens are going to take over, and their expectation for them to manage their diabetes is similar to the way they have oftentimes, especially if you're diagnosed as a little kid, spent years of like counting out the carbs, maybe even weighing the meat or whatever it is, and perfecting their own like sense of control and putting things in order and lining up lunches. And to have that same level of expectation for a different type of brain is just not
Unrealistic
fair and unrealistic.
and frustrating.
So it's frustrating, and then it creates this like sense of friction, and like nobody gets along, and it's
Right.
hard. And then they
So
end up
what do
in
you
my
think is
office.
normal? So let's say, because I think this is one of the things that parents come into appointments with, where they're feeling like they're doing something wrong as a parent of a kid with type one, a teen with type one, like they're failing their teen somehow, or that there maybe is something wrong with their teen because they're doing or not doing some things. So what are some of the common things that we can expect? Now, it's not true of all teens. Not all teens do all of these things, right? But what are the most common things that we
Yeah.
see as not doing in the adult way as far as diabetes?
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't wanna compare, but, like, when you and I were little, there were a lot less tasks
Yes.
expected of children living with type 1 diabetes. Like,
Yeah.
it was I don't wanna say ignorance is bliss, because I am so incredibly grateful for the technology that I have now, and I use all of it, and you use all of it, and
Yeah.
it's awesome. But I didn't really think about diabetes during the day. It was on me to be like, "Hmm, am I low? Am I not low? Maybe I should raise my hand." I didn't have something else telling me how I might be able to feel. So, some part of this is that we have so many expectations for our kids to remember things in addition to their water bottle, in addition to their homework and all their activities and all of the related things that go with just being regular teen. But
Right.
forgetting or skipping a dose, fully kind of just like not counting the carbs and just kind of putting it in there. I would say like not necessarily like lying about blood sugars, but,
Potentially.
not being super as honest with maybe a snack that you had earlier, or just the unpredictable, like, teenage college life schedule of late nights and snacking and not remembering to cover for all the food.
Yeah.
There are and that's kind of common teen stuff. So I
And
think if you
sharing
pair
food
those together,
and
some of
eating with
those kind of
friends.
slacking
Yeah.
behaviors are gonna kind of come with the territory of these boundary pushing buttons that teens are gonna have regardless of T1D.
I think another common one in this bucket is teens tend to more often than previously eat independently with friends,
Mhm.
or if they're in a team sport with the team, and they're concentrating on fitting into the group, and they may honestly forget to dose. Some kids will forget to dose in quotes, right? Because they don't want to do it in front of other people. They might develop that trend and as a
Yeah.
teen. But others honestly are focused on their schoolwork, getting their soccer shoes tied up, like whatever is going on with the team back and forth. And they will chow down on a sandwich and then get out on the field. And then the parent has the follow app and is going, what in the world is happening now? How did
Yeah.
this happen? We had a plan. Why isn't the plan working? And so, what do we do with that? Like, we're going to see all of these things as parents that should be done, needs to be done. How do we prioritize that? How do we, you mentioned maintain the relationship? Those are the big things that I think are most important for sanity and
Yeah.
making it through in as healthy of a way as possible through these years.
Yeah, I mean, I think you listen to any, like, parenting podcast, and the number one thing that always comes up is just, like, validate, like,
Mhm.
it's supposed to be hard,
Yeah.
being a teenager and growing into this, like, new body physically and emotionally, like, it's really hard to be 12. It's
Yeah.
really hard to be in 7th grade. It's really hard to be in 10th grade. And it's not supposed to be easy, and, I think also too, there are so many things that I think in our minds living with type 1 that could go wrong. I think we're sort of brainwashed in this idea of like, ooh, I had a great day. And those are more like few and far between. And so I don't know really where I'm going with this, but I think we always want to celebrate the great days, but it's also okay to celebrate like the great few hours when
Yeah.
it comes with teenage blood sugars. And I think too, like, this idea of positive praise, we don't do enough of it when it comes to teens, especially now when there is so much expectation and a lot of these kids are incredibly driven. Um, but that could also burn them out too. So making sure we're offering like positive praise, like, hey, I see that your, blood sugar was really awesome overnight tonight. I don't know what's happening, but like, what do you think? We're rocking it. And just checking in, especially for teenagers too. I always say, I wish that I had a mom that could just come over and change my sensor and change my pump site for me. This is going to be on their own for the rest of their lives. So
Yep.
if it is just the task of changing the site, hey, I know you have a rough day coming up. You got soccer practice and lacrosse after school, tons of, exams this week. I laid out your pump site stuff. Let me know if that's helpful. And you can even send that in a text just to kind of like put a nudge on their brain, not as in a nagging way, but sometimes just that tone makes a huge difference. I don't know, Tavia, if you have like personal experience or examples you can share in terms of the like
Yep.
tiptoeing around the communication with your kiddo.
Yeah. And I think figuring out what works best, what's least irritating to your teen and to yourself to get the job done is important. And an example that we have is getting sensors changed because my son is totally comfortable going without sensor for a really long time, which is fine while he's awake because he's aware of his symptoms while he's awake. But it's not ideal because he has a really smart automated pump system that can help him with a lot of things in the background while he's busy being a teenager. So his glucose is going to be safer and better managed if it's on. And also at night, he sleeps through everything. He won't necessarily wake up if he's low or if he's really elevated. And if I say really, that means really. I mean, I have a pretty big tolerance range for elevated.
Yeah.
He won't wake up. The other day, he needed a pod changed. It died early, but he was sleeping and his pod died. And his dad came and woke me up and said, he's beeping. I woke him up 3 times, nothing. I've been working on this for like an hour. Maybe you should check on him. And so I get up and I go in there. His pod had died an hour and 38 minutes ago. Not that I was looking. He was making ketones. His room smelled like a ketone I don't know, festival or something. He had taken some insulin, was really elevated because he didn't dose for all his food the night before. His glucose was coming down, and he would have been okay if he had a running pod, but he didn't, and he was sleeping through the whole thing. Like,
Mhm.
it's one of those things. And so internally, I was losing my cool. It was like 4 in the morning, right? But that wasn't going to help the situation. He just needed to change his pod and drink some water. That's what needed to happen. So I
Yep.
woke him up. I handed him his supplies, asked him if he wanted me to help fill it, and watched while he put it on to make sure he was safe. And he drank his water, and we all went back to sleep. And the next day, he said on his own, gosh, if I had just changed my pod the night before and not waited till the last second, then this whole thing likely wouldn't have happened and we would have all gotten to sleep. So I didn't have to nag or freak out on him, even though that was like my first instinct. I'm really super happy that I kept that in and just breathed through it because he knew all that stuff. He
Yeah.
knew. So
Yeah.
so that's a very recent example. It was last week. So fresh on my mind.
And your kiddo is 16?
He's 18.
18.
He's a senior. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Already.
So, and I think this is pretty common too for just anyone. I mean, as an adult, last night I went over and my husband was like, "Your pump, Anna, your pump," and I was like, "Ugh." Like, you're like about to fall asleep. You just
Yep.
turn the light out. You're like finished that last page of your book or whatever you're doing. Turn the light out, and
And the
like you
beach start.
hear those alarms, and I'm just like changing my site. I look over and I had 15% battery, and of course I'm going through in my mind, can I make it through the night with 15%?
Right.
And then I'm like, no, I should plug it in. I should plug it in. But that's my, you know, early 40s brain, not
Right.
my,
Your teenager brain
eighteen-year-old.
wouldn't have even finished that thought before it fell asleep.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I can still be annoyed with it, but at the end of the day, I'm more often than not, I've already had those experiences as a kid or
Right.
even as an adult
Yeah.
where the pump has died and I've woken up and I have little kids. And so do I want to have to change my site in the first thing in the morning? No. So, but all of those thoughts are not in the brain of an 18-year-old.
No. No.
No. And nor should they be.
Right.
So how do we avoid this sort of like
Yeah.
nagging? And those are great examples of just
Yeah.
support.
Yeah.
What can we take off the plate so they don't have to do it all because we can't expect them to do it
Right.
all. And when we're talking about sort of, okay, well, how do we set these boundaries? How do we like sort of start to pull away and talk
Mhm.
about, independence? I mean, I don't think I was like really fully independent until I was like 30.
Yeah.
Now, who knows? But, a lot of kids and young adults are still utilizing their parents' health insurance, which is wonderful. But, you really just have to understand what does independent mean to you? And you can start this independence process
Mhm.
as early as like 8. Have them
Yeah.
pick out their low snacks, have them decide where do they want to rotate their site today. And that is just like empowering them over time to
Yeah.
feel more and more confident in making their own decisions
Mhm.
while balancing the safety piece of it. I think when I get this question a lot, when I do a lot of like presentations or talks, it's like the example I get often a lot is around the Dexcom follow or the parent looking at the child's numbers and the parent
Mhm.
would have intervened earlier and balancing like what that safety net means for both of you. And that the root of that comes down to communication, is
Right.
setting the boundaries and having a strong communication relationship plan that is just like, okay, what is a great number that we both can agree on where I'm not going to bother you or like
Mhm.
you can't expect a phone call or a text from me unless, your blood sugar's over 300 or like below 55. And then it becomes a safety issue. So think about that as you're starting to talk about some of these boundaries. What do boundaries look like in your house and what works again, like you said, Tavia, for your family? And everyone's journey is going to be different
Like
depending
my
on.
son, he came up with some automated text responses using a shortcuts app in his phone. And so if I were to text him about, have you treated that low yet? It would pop up with his drop down answers of, yes, I treated with, and he would pick X, Y, or Z that he treated with and send it back because he
Yeah,
liked doing that more so than typing the whole thing out. And we have an agreement where as long as it's above this threshold, even if it's low, I'll leave you alone. But if it drops below this threshold, if you don't text me right away, then it's my job as your mom to make sure you're safe. I'll be checking in. And so we have that expectation. And sometimes he's on it. Like I don't even have to text him. He's already told me he's got it. And sometimes I have to text him. But
yeah,
there's no frustration there because we know the plan and he's amenable to the plan. He's not against the plan because he helped participate in developing it. And that
yeah,
plan has changed over time. So when he was younger, I would contact more frequently. And now that he's older, then it's really the safety parameters, like you mentioned, elevated enough where I'm worried he's going to make ketones and I need to make sure he's got an active source of insulin in his body, or low enough where he might be in danger if he hasn't already done something about it. So,
yeah,
and that works for our family. Now, some
Think Like a Pancreas, the podcast, is brought to you by Integrated Diabetes Services, where experience meets expertise, passion meets compassion, and diabetes care is personal because we live it too. Our team of clinicians, all living with type 1 diabetes, understands the challenges firsthand. We're here to help no matter where you are in the world. From glucose management to self-care strategies, the latest tech, sports and exercise, weight loss, type 1 pregnancy, and emotional well-being, we've got you covered. We offer consultations in English and Spanish via phone, video chat, email, and text. Want to learn more? Visit integrateddiabetes.com or email info@integrateddiabetes.com to schedule a consultation.
some families have a harder time with it. No matter how the parents are trying to reach out to their teen, they don't necessarily respond back, or the teen gets really annoyed with them. And working with a mental health care provider is one of my best suggestions when this comes up because you have to figure this out as parents with the teens. You have to figure out your communication. one way or another, over time, it needs to be figured out for safety and for your relationship with your teen because it gets really easy to only talk about diabetes with your teen if you're not careful. None of us want to do that, but that's what happens. You only see them for 5 seconds between when they wake up and they splash water on their face and head out for the day. And then you see them for 5 more seconds between sports. And then 10 minutes before they go to bed at night while they're cramming in all their homework or whatever. And so if you need to for safety, it could easily take up all of your conversations if you're not careful about that.
Yeah.
So one of the things you listed actually mentioned earlier about you see a need as a parent and you're thinking about what you know about your teen, you could set out their supplies for them ahead of time and just let them know they're there. And then verify, is that helpful? And if the teen hates it, they will tell you that they hate that. I mean, there's
Yep.
no problem
Or
there,
they'll give you
right?
some
No
snide
harm.
remark or just brush you
Right.
off.
Right.
And
But if they appreciate it, then it gets them a chance to talk nicely to you too and tell them,
Mhm.
yeah, that's cool or thanks for that. And that it's a good partnership. So
Yeah, I think one of the most underused forms of communication is just like a simple question. I think because a lot of the times when we're diagnosed and the parent is sort of the primary caregiver of diabetes and the child, assuming that the parents will have some role in diabetes management, at most, adolescents' lives as they should. But I think sometimes we think we know what they should do. But really, like the person living with type 1 is like the team captain of their own ship. At the end of
right.
the day, they have probably said to you, assuming you're the parent listening, you don't even know what it's like having type 1, or, you have no idea what a low blood sugar feels like. You don't have this. And I mean, I'm guilty of saying that to my own family. I remember as a teen. But a lot of that just comes from feeling misunderstood.
Mhm.
And so how we can like reframe that in our own minds as parents is just say, you know, is just asking questions. Is just asking questions. Hey, how did that sight feel going in? Tell me more about what it was like being, in an exam, like with your device there. Like, I'm curious. And I think there's a real difference between talking out of curiosity versus
Mhm.
talking out of criticism. And teens are very, 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 especially girls, sensitive to criticism.
Mhm.
So if you ask them a question, that puts them in the driver's seat for like just opening up that sense of, I don't want to use the word power, but ability to share
Yeah.
versus, oh,
Being attacked, how do I
on
defend?
this. And it's coming from a place of support and good intentions, but the way it is shared and comes across makes a huge difference to teens.
And I think you can even use that same kind of strategy or thought process behind some rough days of glucose levels. Instead of focusing on the why, because that's the first question that comes to a parent's mind is, why were you low 6 times yesterday? Or why was your glucose 350 for 6 hours? Well, the answer is because they didn't have enough insulin for the situation,
Right.
right? You didn't even,
Diabetes is always the problem, not the child. Even
right.
though even though diabetes is a behaviorally managed disease, it's so easy to just be like, "Well, you didn't do this and you didn't do that." And we all know, like,
It already
9
happened.
times out of 10, it's a hormone issue, the site fell out, they're stressed, and adrenaline is like diabetes is just doing diabetes. This has nothing to do with the personality or the inability of a child to, complete these, like, tasks.
Right.
And if that's the case, then, we talk about some other executive functioning stuff,
Right. Right.
like,
That's a
we have a
different
whole other
scenario.
podcast.
Yeah.
Um,
But, like,
but
my son, if I see we have a pat so I take on the responsibility of looking at his graphs if there are an increase in lows or highs or something, then I'll look at a weekly graph to see if we've got a new pattern we need to manage. Or, like, soccer season just started, so we know we're gonna have new patterns to manage, right? And then I will ask him first, when it's a time where we're not rushing around, "Hey, have you noticed any trends in your glucose lately? Are there any settings you think we should adjust?" And most of the time, he does know. He'll be like, "Yeah, I've been having a ton of lows during practice and after at night. I can't keep my blood sugar up." And I'm like, "Right on. Yeah, good job noticing that pattern. Let's take a look at your settings. Do you want to look at them and calculate them out, or should we sit down here for 5 minutes and just do this now?" And that way, if he wants to do it, great. Then I will say, "Okay, great. Will you text me back when you've made those settings and I'll double check your math." And that way, I know he follows through because I've done it where I'm like, "Okay, great." And then he doesn't change it because that happens, right? But this way I'm not telling him, do it or else, do it now. There's
No,
no
there's no
pressure.
threat involved.
Right. And if he's busy studying for his AP physics exam, then I'm going to calculate it for him because I can do that for him. And
Yeah.
I will offer it to him and I'll say, text me back when you get these changed. And then we're done talking about it and problem solved. And so we don't have to focus on the messy blood sugars. We focus on if there's a pattern. And if it is a behaviorally induced pattern, then my question changes to, do you have any insight on the uptick in lows lately? That way he can tell me about it from his perspective. If he has no idea, great, we'll figure it out. But if he has the insight, or do you have any noticed lately after school lunch, glucoses have been running higher than normal? Do you think it's a carb ratio issue or do you think it's something else? And then he'll tell me, oh, I've been eating seconds and forgetting to dose. Or no, it's a carb ratio issue. I counted really carefully the last 3 days. So I don't have to second guess
And I
him.
love that you framed it. I love that. Like, hey, do you have any insight into the uptick in lows? Like, that is like perfectly worded. I feel like it's like too good to be true. Most people would be like, oh my gosh, I feel like you've been low like every day after school. Like,
This way, it's
what's
about the
going on?
diabetes.
Like,
It's not about
it's,
him. It's not
yeah,
about him. It's about the diabetes. It's about the environment around him. Some of it is his
yeah,
actions and inactions, right? But it doesn't necessarily. Sometimes it's not him at all. Like
yeah,
it's the hormones. It's the school lunches were whatever they were. And, this way, there's been minimal friction when we do it this way.
yeah,
It's easy to do it the other way. The other way is shorter, less words. Why were you so high the last 5 nights? That's the exhausted parent side of it, and it's
right.
harder to do the open framework, not addressing challenging the teen's ability in any way. It's not a reflection of their abilities or personality or willingness to talk to me. It's none of that.
100%. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I want to talk too about just, we've talked a lot about parents, but I think the role of peer support makes a huge difference, especially for those kids who, maybe don't want to talk about diabetes at all. I know you and your son have like a good relationship. The fact that he's able to communicate with you and sit with you and look at the graphs is huge. But there are some kiddos out there who are just like, don't want
No.
anyone to know that they have it. They want to hide it until the cows come home. Devices on the body is a no-no. So what about these kids? And especially these kids who are diagnosed at 13, 14, 15, or not to say there's like a gauntlet age for like starting to attend summer camp, but for me, I was diagnosed at 6 and both my parents were New England summer camp overnight. Like there was no doubt in my mind, in my parents' mind, that I wasn't going to go to an overnight sleepaway camp. And for
Mhm.
me, I still look back and I'm like, that was the best investment that they did for my overall well-being. But from a diabetes standpoint, like I'm obviously like a new person because of, my parents' investment in sending me to diabetes camp from the peer support aspect. And even just like 5 minutes before we started this podcast, I got a text from a couple of my camp friends being like, what is up with the G7 and the new like watch app? Da, 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 da. Like I'm not connected. And so we have these like go to, it's this unspoken understanding that these peer support groups like make a difference. Camp isn't the only thing, but I know for a lot of people it is. So just to highlight the role of peer support, knowing that, friendships and building like this sense of identity in this very, critical time of development and
Mhm.
identity is so huge. So, Tavia, I didn't know if you wanted to add in on like any type of peer support recommendations you have from someone who's in it now.
Yeah, I think that one is a challenge depending on where you live. So
It
diabetes
is.
camp is definitely a great opportunity if your teen is willing to do it. Some will, and if they hadn't done sleepaway camps before, some of them will be more unlikely to want to participate in that, even though it would be likely great for them. And then otherwise, if that's not an option, or even if it is and you want additional, looking for upcoming diabetes expos, diabetes conferences that are geared towards parents and kids or teens living with type 1 is a good way to just get it's sort of like the wow factor. You're usually the only one with type 1, or maybe there are a couple other kids in your school that you've heard have type 1, maybe, but you walk into this place and it's all about diabetes. And you see pumps everywhere and sensors everywhere and beeping everywhere. And you're not the only one in this room with hundreds of other people. Or even if it's a small gathering, 30 people, it's still pretty amazing. So, like the diabetes walks, and usually they take place in spring for fundraisers through Breakthrough
The fall.
T1D.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Then Breakthrough T1D also has different online support options, and they also do gatherings like they'll do tie dye in the park, or they'll do, I don't know, all kinds of things where they
Yeah.
get together just to be around other people who are dealing with type 1, which is a really
They
great
also have,
opportunity.
like, a young adult council for a lot of places that are online, and I think, they're as much as, I have there's a love-hate relationship with, like, cell phone use for teens, but when it comes to peer support, I think it can be a very powerful tool if used appropriately in terms of just teens reading about, whether it's on Instagram or TikTok or wherever, about how others are managing it. And there are so many like weekend programs and, abilities to connect online and then bring those online sort of relationships offline that are out there. There's the Children with Diabetes conference, there's a Touched by Type 1 conference. And yeah, because not everyone in the world is living with type 1, it may take more effort to get yourself there in terms of like you might have to get on a plane to go to a conference,
Yeah.
but they are so impactful, even if it is like an every other year thing to make it work. Because yeah, like the reality is we do have to work a little bit harder for our bodies to be in the same boat as our non-type 1 friends. And that is just the reality of diabetes. Some of the tasks are like chores. We have
Right.
to do them. Like some of them are just non-negotiables.
Right.
We can't like get into the car without our keys. We can't walk without tying our shoes. Well, we have to take insulin in addition to all of those things. That is just part of our nature and
Existing.
we have to do it. Like there's
Yeah.
no ifs, ands, or buts.
Right. I thought of another great resource for
Hmm.
teens and parents if they're thinking about heading into college, or the teen is
Yeah,
in
yeah, yeah, yeah.
the diabetes link is a great one.
Absolutely.
And then for parents, offer integrated diabetes services. We offer a free support group. I don't want to call it support group necessarily, but it is a peer support.
Event session.
It's called Time Out for Caregivers, and it is for the adults in the lives of teens or kids with living with type 1. And it's a time to collaborate, to hear what other people are challenged by, offer up things that you've learned that have been helpful, or come in and just melt down, as is the case. Sometimes, like
Yeah.
you're just at your max, you're super tired and super stressed. Come on over and join us because we understand 100% of what you were talking about. So
Yeah. And we
so
offer them monthly. I think they're usually the first or second Tuesday of
yeah. So you
the
can
month.
find them on our Integrated Diabetes Services website. You can see the um, special services, and they're listed there. You can touch a link on our website and get signed up if you're not already, and we'll send out the invites monthly. And then also, if you are working on, I mentioned I can look at my son's graphs and then calculate all the settings, and that's a special skill that I have because that's my role. I better know how to do that, right? That's part of what I do every day. So if you are not, so if you're a parent and you have 87,000 other things to do in a day, taking the time and doing all the math to figure it out can be a lot. So even though you might be able to do it, if it helps to work with someone, partner with us. We
Yeah.
have a great team at Integrated Diabetes Services, and we can help you figure out the patterns and the math and the strategies. And if you're terrible at math and you hate it, or it terrifies you, or whatever, again, make an appointment with us. We'll be glad to help get your teen's diabetes settings and strategies outlined and updated and adjusted over time. We work really well with a variety of different types of people and ages, and we partner in whatever way supports your family's diabetes needs, as far as how frequently we interact or how we do the calculations, or you do and we double check, whatever works for you. That's what we're here for.
Absolutely. And I think the most important thing is just making sure you have a team or a solid network where both the caregiver and the person living with type 1 can go to. Whether that is camp, whether that is, a best friend whose like sister's mom has type 1, like
Yeah.
making sure that you have your go-to people that you can rely on for support, whether it's through a text, whether it's through camp, whether it's through, meet for dinner 4 times a year, it doesn't matter. But once you find those people, like keep them really close because it makes a huge difference having, not only your diabetes healthcare team, but those people in your corner. And
Yes.
they may be different from your child's, and they should be
Right.
actually.
Yeah.
And to Tavia's point too, all of us at IDS like live with type 1. All of our
Mhm.
clinicians have type 1 diabetes, decades of experience going through this. And I think that does make a world of difference when you are trying to reflect and connect and make a plan for your
Yeah.
individual family moving forward. As we start to think about just like going off to college and like, dating, driving, and whatnot, is there anything else, Tavia, that you want to share from your perspective and like sort of like advice as you've kind of just gone through this? Like you're at 18 now, like looking back, would you have done anything differently?
Oh, yeah, all kinds of things differently. I would have done some things sooner and not waited as long out of just the unknown. And I would have started with the more open questions versus the like trying to delineate what happened and when around
Mhm.
blood sugars for sure. I would have sent my son to diabetes camp. It was during COVID, so we didn't
Mm,
do that in the beginning. And then he got used to being at home. And so he was like, I'm not going overnight somewhere. I don't want to. So we sort of missed that boat. But I see it with our clients and hear it from their kids that it's a really good opportunity for them. And I think it's important to think about how things shift and they'll
yeah,
continue to shift and it's not linear. So a kid who's transitioning into prepping to get in, if they're going to go to college, they might be at this point right now where they can do all the diabetes things. And then within a month of landing where they're going to land for college, you might see their glucoses slip. That's normal. It's expected. As long as they're safe, we're good. If not, then it's time to use that good communication that you had set up before, hopefully, to find out how you can support them and help them stay safe and get them the resources they need. So I think
yeah.
just continuing to get support and shifting that relationship of who's in charge of what over time is important to focus on.
100%. I love that. I think the most important thing is just continue to love your kid, you know, if they have diabetes or not, and maintain those, positive reinforcement behaviors and continue to meet them where they are and their needs. And, the goal of parenting is just you want them to continue to love you back when you are old and gray.
Right.
So, you keep that relationship alive. And even if that means a lot of blood sugars that are out of range for maybe a short period of time.
Yeah. Thanks everybody for joining us.
Yeah.
We appreciate that you spent this part of your day with us.
And if you
And
have additional topics or want us to delve into any of these more from the mental health perspective or any perspective, really let us know.
our
And
contact info is on our website. If you go to integrateddiabetes.com, you
follow us
can
on Instagram.
all the things.
Yeah.
Thanks for tuning in to Think Like a Pancreas, the podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to like, follow, or subscribe on your favorite podcast app. On behalf of Think Like a Pancreas, the podcast, I'm Gary Shiner, wishing you a fantastic week ahead. And don't forget to think like a pancreas.